So you're out shopping for your next vehicle and you wonder, when's the best time? Should you buy it today, tomorrow? When is it? The end of the year? Possibly at the end of the month? Well, let's talk about that. Yes, because a lot of people believe that they know the best time and the best opportunity to buy a vehicle. Well, there are some rules of thumbs and there's certainly some AI responses, but there's a new strategy I'm going to offer up here as well at the end. But on top of it, you have to understand these dealers have been doing this for a long time. And while they're hungry certain parts of the year, other times you're going to absolutely get rooked. Because when you're shopping for that shiny new vehicle, it doesn't matter how much you know about buying a car. If you don't buy it at the right time of the year, you could in fact wind up with a limp balloon and get the worst deal possible. If you love cars, if you're shopping for a new vehicle and you want to get the best deal possible, definitely want to hit that subscribe button. I'm going to try to get you through that. I've been in the car business now for 35 years and I want to help you, guide you on your next car purchase. Now, of course, there's always going to be caveats. Popular models that are always quick sellers are always going to be tough to get a great deal on. But there are definitely some odds in your favor when you shop at the right time of the year. I mean, when you look at your next new vehicle, whether it's a new EV or possibly an incoming popular SUV, or even something that's tried and true and a lot of people buy because of the brand name and they like names like Jeep, and maybe you're a luxury car buyer and you like BMWs. Regardless, whatever it is, if you're buying new or used, many of the rules still apply in getting the best deal. Now, some people say, buy on a Monday. Yes, often buying Mondays is a much better opportunity. A lot of people think, you know what? Oh, they're going to get a lot of this attention going in on the weekends. Well, guess what? The weekends, even though it's busy, a lot of people assume, in fact, that they're going to have an opportunity to get a great deal because the dealers are often going to want to usher you through, sign the deal really quick, and possibly might even cut a deal just to get you through to get them into the next client. But that couldn't be further from the truth. A modern day salesperson will do whatever it takes, even to rally some of their friends, co-workers, or even the manager to backfilling to get that next purchaser in the door and get the next purchaser buying that vehicle. So whether you're buying on a weekend, which is hustle bustle, that really has no impact. However, a Monday, which is very typically a very slow time of the day or the week, that is often a great opportunity to get a good deal. Another great time to possibly go shopping for your next car is at the end of the month. Now, a lot of these manufacturers have these big incentives and they're constantly pushing for quotas and the numbers game. And general managers are often going to set some of these targets, but as they round out by the end of the month, it is a bit of a risk because quite often a lot of the inventory might be gobbled up by then. However, if there is some of the inventory of the type of vehicle you're looking for, you could make a huge win because a lot of those quotas still have to be met. And if some of those vehicles are not sold yet, there's a huge opportunity for a win. They have to make their numbers. That's ultimately the game. And there's another amazing time to do it. A lot of people say, well, at the end of the year, that is a given. Come November, though, is a typical time you're into the holiday season. They're introducing the new models. A lot of these new models start popping up. And of course, they're now trying to sell the newest models, meaning some of the outgoing models are no longer popular. They maybe have the old technology, maybe have some obsolete, maybe the old designs, and they just want to get rid of that newer, that older product. In the meantime, the new stuff takes precedence. So they're going to do whatever it takes to get you into some of the older models and get those pushed out the door. So at the end of the year, as you round out November, gets even better and they really start ramping up the incentives to get those vehicles sold. Come December, many people argue, and I've seen it time and time again, that come December you're going to get a phenomenal deal typically, and as you get closer to Christmas and the New Year's, even though they may be busy trying to wrap up the year, the quotas hit harder and more furious. Remember, they've got new models showing up, so ultimately they're going to be trying to push out the outgoing inventory. If it's 2025 rolling around the clock in a month or two, obviously they're going to want to get rid of the old 2023 and 2024 model years, and of course that means huge incentives for you, the buyer. Now, another great time to get your new vehicles in the springtime. Of course, a lot of times we hear about some of the big sales. Long weekends are a big opportunity, and that's usually the kickoff, Memorial Day, and some of the big holidays that are 3-day weekends. Often look for 3-day weekends to score your next deal, because a lot of times that's when a lot of these motivation, a lot of these dealers, a lot of the manufacturers are pushing those incentives out, and they're trying to push the products, they're trying to move some of this metal. So long weekends can also work in your favor drastically, because it's sort of the unspoken book and rule that they want to sell their vehicles. So you could go into there, you can go into the dealership, whether it's used or whether it's brand new, you can usually find some great deals. They want to try to push that metal. They know people are in a flurry. They know people are getting some of their cash refunds back. They know a lot of people are getting some of their tax returns back, and they know people are itchy to buy a new vehicle. So as a result, they're pushing hard, anticipating a lot more foot traffic, and as a result, they're much more likely to negotiate. Now, there are in fact some really bad times to buy a vehicle, whether you're new or used. Used vehicles, you don't want to buy right after a major flood or catastrophe like you see in Florida, because it doesn't often have time to make it to the radar to get the Carfax details update. And quite often that means a lot of these vehicles could fly under the radar. You could in fact be buying a used vehicle that was just sunk, and you don't want that. So you've got to wait it out, wait a period of time, 6 months to a year, to get that used vehicle purchase out there. But if you're buying new, that's less of an issue. Now, a new vehicle purchase is one of the worst times to buy is when a fresh Restyle came out. It usually, there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of hubbub, everybody's excited about that new Restyle, that new redesign. And even though it may not be as good as the outgoing, because we all know that some of the older models are often better built, and quite often many would argue that will last longer, it doesn't matter. The vast majority of the population is looking for the latest and the greatest. So the buzz on that new redesign often means that you're not going to get a deal on it. You're likely going to overpay. And we saw this all happening with many models. The Ford Bronco. When the Ford Bronco came out, you could not get a vehicle. As a matter of fact, many of them were charged over MSRP. And I heard of many people paying $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 over sticker. The same thing when the initial Corvette came out. You could not find a Corvette. The Stingray, 500 horsepower. It was a fun car, and it was something new. It was a whole new redesign with the mid-engine, and everybody had to have one. So people were grossly overpaying. Now that a couple of years have gone by, the market is stabilized, and Corvettes, you can't give them away. So here's a couple classic examples of cars that are hard to sell these days. Nissan's not selling a lot of products, and unfortunately, even with as great as these look, they're not selling. Huge incentives available. So I'm generally a believer in buying something that's possibly outgoing, buying something that's maybe yesterday's news, not as popular. And there's clearly more inventory out there in the market to get your hands on. That means you're gonna have a much stronger negotiations tactic. Other great times are when there's huge incentives and rebates. That's clear indication that dealers aren't moving as much metal as they'd like to. There's a reason there's an incentive there. They're trying to push metal, they're trying to move metal. They have all these floor plan costs that are adding up. In other words, their costs are like your costs, borrowing costs. They have to pay every single month for as long as that vehicle's on the lot. So they want to move it. Typically after 30, 60 days, it starts to hit the radar, and they want to get that vehicle gone. So if a vehicle's been there for 6 months, maybe a year, you know they're paying a significant amount of floor plan costs, and they're not loving that. That's going to cost them dearly out of their bottom line. So the longer the vehicle sits on the lot, the better deal you'll have. So how do you find out where these great deals are? So herein lies my next strategy. And this is one that they don't always throw down, but this is one I've realized that really helps. It's sort of back home, and it almost makes sense, but this actually does get you a much better deal. As you're scrolling through sites, one specific site that I like is Car Gurus, because it tells you some stuff. You can look inside, you go into the ad, and then it basically tells you how long that vehicle's been there. When you scroll all the way down, you can find very quickly if it's selling slowly. Like in this case, it says the vehicle's selling slowly. Price was decreased here. You'll notice this one says it's already been down by almost $14,000 decrease in the overall price since the beginning of time. That means this 2024 Ford F-150 STX is an absolute immense deal. Huge bargain by all accounts. Look, I mean, almost $14,000 off the original MSRP price. How does that get you a deal? Well, the best time are vehicles that aren't selling. And this is what I'm trying to say. This is one of those strategies that I like to use. So it's great to know when the best time is, you know, year end. And of course, as you wrap up the year of 24 and you roll into 25, you know, the year end, November, December typically is a good time. Holiday season, long weekends, good times. Don't buy old junk. Definitely watch out for those storms, and don't buy vehicles right after a storm. But ultimately, the best strategy I find is to find days supply, excessive days supply, inventory that's been around a long time. You can find that information on Cox Auto. Look it up, Cox Automotive, and they usually have day supply inventory, and you can see which models and which makes specifically are hanging out there, which aren't selling. Remember, the average day supply right now is around that 30 days supply. So typically within a month, if you don't produce anything further, they're pretty much going to run out of inventory. But there are manufacturers that actually are up in that 60, 110, 150 days supply. We even saw the electric, the EV charger, having days supply that were almost 3 or 4 years. And so typically vehicle brands like Jaguar and Range Rover, Alfa Romeo, typically are longer days supply, and those often are heavily incentivized, better deals. And so the time of the year is slightly less impactful because those vehicles just aren't selling and you could pretty much walk in there at any point. But one of the things I look at is days supply. When I look at the Car Guru's website and I look at the application, you can often find great deals available by just looking on the site, and you can find how many days supply and how long that vehicle's been on the lot. Because now you've got a strategy. You can go into the dealership because it actually tells you which specific dealer has that vehicle. You can go into the dealer, say, here's the VIN, here's the vehicle I'm interested in, how much? And now you can go in there, know that if the vehicle's been there for a year, if it's been there for 8 months, maybe 2 years, you now have the power in your hands to go in there and knock some deals out of the park. And this is a strategy I like to use specifically. So the time of the year does matter, but actually going in there with the knowledge and understanding of a model that's been around for a long time, and also knowing that floor plan is starting to add up for these dealers, they're going to be really incentivized to sell that vehicle. So hope that helps everybody. I'd like to hear your thoughts if you like it as well. Again, as always, more information about where new cars go that don't sell. Yeah, right there. Hope to see each and every one in the next one, everybody. See you then. Bye-bye.